this video, I want to talk about the future of European competitiveness. This is part A of the report. It was famously authored by Mario Draghi. For those that don't know, Mario Draghi is a banker, statesman, politician, and he was head of the European Central Bank. He's had a very long career, very successful career. In addition to obviously being Prime Minister of Italy for a time, he was also at the World Bank for a long time, and then he headed the European Central Bank. So it's clearly somebody that understands economics and finance very well, as well as the political side. So when he authored this report, he really delved into basically the structural issues he sees that need to be solved by the Europeans as they move forward and try to navigate basically the economy in the next couple of decades. And as we all know, now that tariffs have come about, and in basically the international multilateral system on which most European countries had relied on to basically grow rich, expand their market access, and all the soft power that goes along with that, align supply chains and all the political relationships that have been built around the world basically since the end of World War II. And in best case scenario, you can say they're on shaky ground. Worst case scenario, you can say that countries have kind of realized that that period is over, and whatever comes next, they're going to have to basically form blocks and fend for themselves if they're smart. And as we're about to read, the report kind of hints at that unity is the key to move forward. And I sincerely hope that the European Union can get its act together and act as a cohesive unit, because if we're being honest, never in the history, I think, of humanity has an economic bloc of so many different nations and have come together and worked together after a long history of conflict. And so that, I think, is a contribution of epic proportions, in the sense that it shows that countries can come together, they can bury the hatchet, they can form alliances on the cultural, economic, and political level to move forward and make sure that their citizens live well. Because at the end of the day, what is all this politics and economics about if not to make the life of people better, right? And leave a better world for the future generations to come. So with a little bit of that background, this video, we're only going to read the background, or the foreword, I should say, and then we'll discuss that as we go along. The report, as I said, really hits at a lot of things, a lot of issues that I think most of us see. I mean, this isn't really, it's not putting satellites in orbit, right? This is pretty forward stuff that if you kind of just pay attention, you might not have the, obviously, financial or economics vocabulary to articulate it this way, but it's more or less what we see in the day-to-day stuff, right? So there's a worry in Europe, and there has been at least since the start of the century, it's 25 years now, about the various ways that economic growth can come about, and there doesn't seem to be a cohesive line that has been followed through for any significant amount of time anyway. And what I mean by that is that governments come, governments go, and then they kind of switch, they pivot, they try different things, and that lack of cohesiveness in a single direction is actually starting to hurt countries, right, in the long term. And 25 years of data is starting to show that. So nonetheless, there are things, positive things, and we'll talk about them. But one of the things that struck me from the report was that on a per capita basis, real disposable income has grown almost twice as much in the US as in the EU since 2000. That's 25 years, so think about that, right? The safety of U.S. security umbrella freed up the defense budgets to spend on other priorities. So this one's a big one, because now with the new administration in the U.S., and we'll talk about that in another video, to kind of give you guys an idea, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, the Germans relied on access to Chinese markets, which now apparently there's at least a trade rift at the moment, so that potentially is not there anymore. They relied on cheap Russian energy, as we know, because of geopolitical events. That is no longer being supplied to the German market, obviously. And they relied on the American defense umbrella. And recently we saw the Merz administration move to increase, well, they changed their constitution to be able to increase their budget, their defense budget. And we'll talk about that in a future video as well. So these are structural changes that you cannot quickly pivot to. So it's not like a prime minister in any country can just sit at their desk, or a president sit at their desk and press a button and then the economy of that country rearranges. That's not how this works. There's already contracts in place, plans in place, building plans, building codes, logistics, all this stuff is already set in place. So if something monumental like the three things I just described to the German economy happen, and in relatively short order for economic terms, which is, a matter of months, then yeah, that has a real effect long term. And so I'll keep reading in the report stuff that I just highlighted that I thought was noteworthy and stuff to talk about, right? So unfortunately, countries during the pandemic, we all saw this, right? That dependencies, so having long, complex supply chains that you don't really know where certain parts are made here, then the rest of the part is made over there. Dependencies have now been seen as vulnerabilities, right? And that's a lot of what we're seeing now, that governments are kind of waking up to that. And only four of the world's four of 50 tech companies of the world that are leading technology and development and innovation are European, which is definitely worrisome, right, in Europe, because that's what's going to guarantee economic growth and prosperity in the medium term and in the long term, right? So the priorities, as Mario Draghi sees it in this report, is to digitalize and decarbonize the economy and increase their defense capacity, European defense capacity. The investment share of Europe will have to rise by about 5 percentage points of GDP to levels not seen in the 1960s or 70s. This is unprecedented. For comparison, the additional investment provided by the Marshall Plan between 1948 and through 1951 amounted to around 1 to 2% of GDP annually. So this is monumental. And when you start to think about the fact that a lot of the budgets are already committed, right? And the new American administration wants European defense to increase to 5% of GDP in order to honor its NATO commitments, which it hasn't been outright said yet, but that's what's going around in the rumor mill, right? So if Europe cannot become more productive, they will be forced to choose. They will not be able to become at once a leader in new technologies, a beacon of climate responsibility, and independent player on the world stage. We will not be able to finance our social model. We will have to scale back some, if not all, of our ambitions. And that's where it gets tricky, right? Because we'll delve into it in future conversations, but this is what really struck me from this entire report, at least in the foreword section, is this is an existential challenge. That means the European Union, as we understand it, could come to an end if this is not addressed, if these issues are not addressed. Now, that's not alarmist, it's just a fact. And can it be addressed? Of course it can be addressed. Europe has a lot of brilliant people, and it's just a matter of getting together, working together, developing these plans, and actually following through, because that's another criticism that Mario Draghi makes in a little bit, and we'll see it. So, Europe's fundamental values are prosperity, equity, freedom, peace, and democracy in a sustainable environment. The EU exists to ensure that Europeans can always benefit from these fundamental rights. If Europe can no longer provide them to its people, or has to trade off one against the other, it will have lost its reason for being. That's a really straight to the heart kind of comment, right? And then Europe has to radically change. We'll read the rest of the report in different videos. But suffice it to say that there is hope. There is always hope. And in economics and politics, right? It's man-made, and which means that we can change it. And I have to have faith that we will, because there really isn't any other options, as we'll see. So, yeah, let's keep the conversation going.